Hey guys, welcome back to Vertical Momentum. I am your host, Richard Kaufman, also known as the Comeback Coach. Guys, they say never meet your heroes. Bullshit. Kelly is one of mine. An amazing person, podcaster, author, speaker. He's the Swiss Army knife of positivity, and I'm so blessed to be able to have him come on today. Kelly, say hello to VM Nation.
Well, VM Nation, you guys are doing the right thing. Richard, what you're doing here, man, is absolutely phenomenal. And not only what you're doing, but who you are. The small amount of time that we just spent before we started recording, your listeners know who you are. The heart and soul that you bring to this is phenomenal. So my hat's off to you, man.
Wow. Thank you so much. Now, like I said, people know when they're on the show, it's just two brothers shooting the shit. So, but my question is, because now I hear so much about cancel culture, toxic workplace. What is culture actually?
Well, I think we have to go to the definitions. Now, I'm not a very educated guy, right? I barely graduated from high school, but I have this thing called Wikipedia, right? And Google. And I find that has got me my doctorate in so many areas. So I'm just going to read it to you. It's to maintain conditions for suitable growth. And when I read that part of it, as far as a culture, because most people think culture is like we set it in line and then we just walk away from it. And when it says like to maintain conditions that are suitable for growth, then it has to be a living, breathing organism in your family or in your relationships or in your business. And if it's not alive, then it's dead. And if it's dead, it's just a bunch of written rules that people don't follow anyway. And this is the thing that I find with so many companies. They say our culture is, and then they point to the thing on the wall and they don't even remember it. And if you can't state your principles, like off the top of the dome, they're not your principles. They're just a bunch of rules that you wrote down, and rules are nothing much more than a list of our screw ups anyway. So you're leading by your screw ups.
So now, because I'm a big wrestling guy, I've worked with guys from this certain company. I can't say because I'm not about to get jammed up. But their CEO just gotten some deep doo doo, but they've had bad culture for a while. So is it possible to? Because like for me, I'm a sports geek. You know, I was a Tampa Bay fan before Brady got there, but when he got there, in 1 year they changed the whole culture.
Okay.
So is it easy or is it really hard to get into a company and change the culture and turn it around?
Well, I think the first thing that I want to answer, and it's not a question that you asked, but first thing that I want to say is I don't believe there's any bad cultures. This is a part that people say, like they'll be like, oh, I'm just a part of a bad culture. But your culture, you're always performing at 100% of what your culture actually is. And that was a mind-blowing thing for me, meaning that if your people show up late, they talk down to people. That's the culture that you put in play from your leadership. And based off of that, your people are scoring 100% based off that culture, because leadership is always like attitude is always going to reflect leadership, as remember the Titans taught us. Right. So
Yep.
when we go through to construct a culture, I think that we really have to look at it as a long game. It's a 3 steps for me. Number 1, you build the people. Number 2, you develop the culture. And number 3, you grow the business. But most people get this backwards. I need to get the culture right so I can grow the business. No. You need to get to the people. If you get to the people, which is the foundation of any business, and you build the people will then develop the culture and they will grow the business on their own.
You know, and I love that. Now, David, Mr. Meltzer, was on the show last week, and he talked about how by the age of 34, he was a multimillionaire, lost $100 million, and then he decided, I'm starting all over again. And then he put his values in order. For me, my values are God, family, business. And if you're not a part of that 3, then everything else is going to the wayside. So now, well, before we get into that, where do you come from? What were you like as a kid? Were you always like this positive powerhouse or what?
Well, my pop, if you met my pop, you would think I was negative. My pop was probably the most positive guy you ever met in your life. When I was a kid, I was a bit angry. I had a bit of an attitude problem, and And it was just learning, man. I mean, that's why, the humility part of it is not an act. It's the fact that I know that I was a bonehead for a lot of my life. I know in business, I've made a lot of mistakes, and from those mistakes, then I tell the stories, and the stories are worth more than any of them. So, I grew up in a military family where we constantly had to, move around. We had to, adapt to different areas, things like that. And I always had to be the new kid, and we had to, fall in love with this thing. We had to figure out this thing that we talked about earlier, which was choosing joy, man. Because we didn't always have the best circumstance, but my mom taught me that fall in love with your current circumstances and allow magic to happen. And that was choosing joy as opposed to seeking happiness, which was based off of circumstance. And if you're chasing happiness, then you're going to be happy and sad based off your circumstance. But when you choose joy, then it doesn't matter whatever happens to you. You could lose your job, you could lose your company, you could lose millions of dollars like I have. You could do that, and you still have a smile on your face because you know what? Something else is coming.
And I love that, even like John in the Bible said, no matter where I'm at, whether I'm hungry, whether I'm fed, cold or warm, I'm happy. And a lot of people, they're always living in either the past or they're living in the future, but they're not being in the present.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So now you grow up military, and I find that either the kids go with their parents and they join the military, or they go totally to the right.
Yes.
So what did you do when you out of high school? What were you like? Did you go to college?
Well, I thought I was going to go in the military right away. I thought that this was going to happen because when we lived in the, on the base, you didn't pay for housing. You had the BX, you know what I'm saying? Like you had all these things. And I thought that that's the way I was going to go until, we didn't have enough money to be able to get haircuts. My dad bought dog clippers, and to shave the dog to save money. I started cutting all my friends' hair. And my mom said, why don't you go to school for that? And I was just going to go to community college and just kind of get my prerequisites. And my brother was going to help me with that. And my mom said, why don't you go to school for that? Because she watched me cutting hair in our kitchen. And from a military family, and my pop, he said, I'll support you in anything that you do as long as you do it to 100% of your ability. And so when I went into the hair industry, I just I studied every person that was the top people in it. I chased them, and I just forced them to be my friend, just like you. I'm going to force you to be my friend for the rest of your life. And I find
that's a wrap.
And I tell you, Richard, like, honestly, there's three things really, and it's pretty simple, man. If you're really, really kind, which means that you contribute to everyone, you make a ton of friends, and you stay curious, there's nothing, absolutely nothing that you can't do in your life and you can't accomplish. And I find this in any business, in any walk of life. Be kind, contribute to everyone, make a ton of friends so you don't have to be good at very many things, and stay super, super curious so you're not always the smartest person in the room, and that will give you wings.
I love that. And I think I got the biggest compliment ever by Mr. Meltzer last week. He said, he sent me a quote for my graphic, and he said, Richard is, he's more interested than he is interesting. And I was like, wow. And I thought for a second, I'm from Jersey, I'm thinking, I'm like, that doesn't sound cool. And then I looked it up, and I was like, when I read it, I was like, wow, I think if a lot of people would be more interested in people than trying to be interesting in themselves, I think you'd have a lot more friends in life. Now, when you started, because I believe the best people you can ever talk to is your barber and your bartender, because those two, it seems you have nothing but their attention. So, but one thing I love that you said, because I want to go back, is you said, and I read something that you just put out recently, was success leaves clues. And a lot of times, like the first 3 years I was in podcasting, I was just all willy-nilly until then I woke up one day and I'm like, all right, what are the top guys like Adam Carolla, Ed Milet, Dave Meltzer? What are they doing? That's what I want to do. And I think what you're saying is a lot of people, when they get into any field, they don't look at the top performers. They're just trying to survive at the bottom level. You know what I mean? So how did you get that mindset of, all right, I'm going to see what the best are doing, and I'm going to model myself after that?
Well, I think it was my parents giving me permission, right? And oh, go ahead. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Oh, I think there was a little delay in the video, so I just wanted to make sure that I was honoring you.
Oh,
I think it was my parents, Richard, giving me permission, right? And they gave me permission because my mom would always say three things to me: one, you're awesome; separate yourself from your accomplishments and accept your greatness. Number two, that I was beautiful and that I didn't have to compare myself to anyone. And number three, it was that I could do anything, but just because I could do it. Didn't make it my purpose, didn't make it right for me. And my dad would always just tell me, you're the greatest, son, so act accordingly. And, with those kind of things, what it did is it really, again, when I talk about giving me wings, it just gave me this, not this, overconfidence, but it was just this part of like, what's the worst that could happen? Like I'm living in the worst possible reality based off of me taking a chance, meaning that if I take a chance and I don't make it, I already don't have that thing. So if I try and be your friend and you don't want to be my friend, I already am not your friend right now. So that I'm already living in the worst possible scenario that could possibly happen. So that's why for me, I'm not very risk adverse. I want to take risks. I want to step out and I want to try something, and if it works, then I write it down, I systemize it and I work it out. If it sucks, I write that down too. And then it becomes a system and I either win or I learn. And as long as that keeps happening, then I can choose joy. And that's the part that my mom, like, you go and try it, like go try those things. And the more that you try, the more confidence you build, and the more confidence that you build, it doesn't come from your ego. It'll come from the fact that you've just done it before. So you're going to help other people. You're going to be open to other people. And, it's people like you, man. Like when we got on the call, David was completely correct about you. You were interested in me and you make people feel amazing, Richard. And that's why you're so successful at what you do.
Thank you. I'm truly humbled. I am blushing, guys. But so I have a question to ask because just recently we bought my son a car. He's in high school, getting ready for college, and he's the best kid in the world. And when I say it, I mean it. 3-sport athlete, high honors, doing it all. And we bought him a car, and he drove me for the first time, and I could see the pride in him driving me. You know what I mean? So what was it like the first time you had your father sitting in the chair, cutting his hair? What was that like?
Well, the first time it wasn't good because I was in, I was probably in 11th grade. I was in the kitchen and we lived in a double wide mobile home on the side of the freeway. And I didn't know how to cut the top of people's hair. I just knew how to cut the sides so I could fade it up a little bit. And I took a number 2 guard. For those of you out there that know from back in the old school, I took a number 2 guard. I ran up the side of his head to the top, like up near his temple. Now, this was a man who had a job. This wasn't a kid. So I ran it up there, but I didn't know how to fade it into the top. So then my dad looked like he had this toupee on top of his head. And it was a learning lesson, man, because I could see my pop. I knew he hated it, but he didn't tell me that I was awful. He just said, thank you so much, son. I love it. And he rocked it. And what it taught me was no matter what gift that I ever got in my life, to be grateful for it, because the giver is the person that needs the blessing. And a lot of times when we react negatively to something that somebody gives to us, even if it's absolutely sucks, and this haircut sucked, we can kill that person's spirit. And I believe that he knew that he could have killed my spirit, but he said, I love it, son. This is awesome. This is the best haircut I've ever had. And what it did is it inched me closer to continue to try, and gave me permission, like I was talking earlier, to just try things because I knew I had the support of my father.
And I love that. Now, before we were hopping on, we're talking about what we're going to do with our kids for this weekend. I lost my dad Valentine's Day this year, so this is going to be a hard one. But I believe that we either speak life into our children or we speak death into our children. A lot of times it's not saying anything. Like last night, me and my son just hung out, watched the basketball game, Golden State. And it was great. He wasn't even paying attention, but he doesn't realize that I was getting more enjoyment just sitting there with him than actually watching the game. So talk to us a little bit about, like we were talking about earlier, the reason why we do this, why we work so hard and so long, is so we can spend the time with our families and our kids to build a legacy. Like, because Gary Vaynerchuk, when I met with him and we had lunch, he said, your legacy is always more valuable than your currency. So talk about legacy a little bit.
Well, I think the legacy that I want to leave for my kids is that, it isn't always going to be perfect, and no matter who you are, if you're a human being, it isn't going to be that way. And, you talk about the war. I'm a huge Warriors fan and Dub Nation. I'm excited that they won last night, but I failed yesterday. I failed with my daughter and I failed with my son because my daughter wanted a perm yesterday. And, it got to be around 4:47 and the game started at 6. And I brought her over to the salon and I rushed through it a little bit. And I didn't make her feel like a queen. And she could tell it. And then I got home and I told my son to record the game. And I walked in and it wasn't being recorded. And I got a little bit snippy with him. And I noticed that I ended up on the couch by myself watching the finals and watching my team win. But the feeling and the joy of my team winning for the 4th time and knowing that we didn't need KD, that, that we're a championship pedigree as the Warriors, was kind of taken away because I was a jerk to my son and a jerk to my daughter. And what I want them to realize is that, not everything's going to always be perfect, man, but you're going to have to learn from it. And I went up to my son, before we went to bed, and I grabbed him and I said, I want to apologize to you, son. And he said, well, and he's 10 years old. And he said, why, Dad? And I said, well, I didn't treat you well today and that's not okay. And he said, you know what, Dad, it's okay. It's okay. And I said, no, it's never okay. And I want to let you know that. And sometimes it's, the legacy that I want to live or leave to my kids is that it's okay to screw up, learn from the lesson and call your shots, like call it out when you're a jerk, like I was last night, call it out. And make sure that they know. And the last thing, as far as legacy wise, is I want to make sure that they always see me love their mother. And, this is probably one of the most underrated things in the world that you could do as a businessman is love your wife. And, love your wife at the highest level. Don't ever put your business in front of your wife. And don't make sure that for your kids, the example that you leave. And what I want to leave, I'm not preaching this to everybody, but I want to show my kids every single day that I loved their mom at the highest level. And I'll fail at it. But if I fail at it in front of them, like I have, I want to make sure that they see me stick my tail between my legs, stay humble, come to them and apologize to their mom and apologize to them and make sure that I work through it, because I believe that that's, for me, I saw that in my dad. And I think that a real man is not always succeeding. A real man is being okay with failing as long as he owns it.
Oh, and me, I'm a big, now to tell you, my fans know that, I wasn't a big Grant Cardone guy to start out with. But once I found out his backstory and him coming back from recovery, from being an addict for 15 years, it changed my whole life. But his book, 10X, the book was great, but the thing I got out of it was everything from this point on in your life is your fault. It may not be what happens to you, but it's how we react. And I think a lot of people, and especially like in the cultures that we're living in, are blaming everything on mom, dad, grandpa, thousands of years ago. So talk to us about, because for me, I'm a big mindfulness guy. If I screw up, I'm going to tell you right away I screwed up. I'm sorry. I don't want it to fester. You know what I mean? So, but, and sometimes to a fault, but, talk to us about, because I think people are attracted now to people that are open, honest, and, realizing we all put our pants on the same way. Because if you remember, Tony Robbins years ago would wear the shirt, the ties. Now he's wearing T-shirts, hats, like Ed Milet. So talk to us about people becoming more real, I should say.
Well, I think a large part of it, right, is people ask me about my keynote speaking, right? And they're like, oh, well, you're a speaker. And I said, no, I'm a doer who happens to talk about it. And I think that there's a difference. I mean, you know, I'm not there to tell people what to do. I'm telling people about my story, and hopefully it'll inspire them from all the mistakes that I've made. I mean, even from last night or 2 nights ago, I was playing NBA 2K with my son
Oh
Maddox.
God, we got to hook
And
up. I love NBA. We got to hook
oh
up.
man, I love it. And so I was playing some NBA 2K22, and he was the Warriors and I was the Boston. I was the Celtics, because we wanted to run the series like the NBA finals. And he was whooping me. I mean, he had me down 3-0, and we played a game a night, just like the finals. And he's 10 years old again, you know, and we were playing game 4, and he was beating me by 30 points. And then he was dropping threes on me, swatting my shot, and he was calling it out. And I tell you, Richard, I was getting mad. I was getting like angry and frustrated, and he could see it. And I got so angry, and he was like, "Dad, you want to switch up and see if I could come back?" I was like, "No." And I was just mad at him. And I was like, I had to step aside afterwards and realize that I'm a 47-year-old man, and I'm so frustrated. I'm like wanting to prove a point to a 10-year-old. And, you know, it's again, it's those kind of things, but those are real raw emotions. And a lot of people go through them and they think that I can't talk about that because then I'd be a bad dad. Well, I was a bad dad for a little bit. I'm a bad dad during the playoffs, during the NBA playoffs. I'm a horrible dad. But I think that it's people want something real. They want something when they scratch the surface that they're going to get the exact same thing that they saw on the surface. And I would much rather show them my really bad side, show them that I'm just an absolute human being, that I've closed more businesses than I've opened. But you know what? And I've lost like I was saying, I've lost millions of dollars. In one point in my life, in probably 2-3 years ago, within 3 or 4 months, I lost $1.2 million. Now, on the flip side of it, I had a $1.2 million in business to lose. So that's the part that I want to make sure that people know, is that your circumstances don't have to be perfect. Just fall in love with them. You can't, if you can't be with the one you love the one you're with right now, the life that you have right now. And it's never going to be perfect. You're always going to be a bonehead, but learn from it and be okay. And people will give you that grace if you give the grace to yourself.
I love it. Can I tell you my geeky story? So as I'm a big 2K guy, as I progressed through the game, I got drafted by the Warriors. So I'm a 7-foot center, and we won. You know, as we won the championship last night, I actually ordered a T-shirt with my number on it and my jersey number and my name on it because I've been playing with them on 2K. And my wife's like, "Are you really that stupid?" I'm like, "Yeah." I'm like, "But at least I own it." You know what I mean? So I got a jersey coming in that says number 91 junior on the back of it.
Oh, I love it.
So now, you know, talking about, you know, because David said, you know, he lost it all because he went to the Grammys with somebody he wasn't supposed to go with, and his wife found out about it, and she was pissed off and said, "Listen, it's either me or you got to change."
Little John. It was Little John, right?
Yeah. So, and he had got home, and he had to change, and he had to declared bankruptcy and everything, but he had to come back. But he came back stronger. So after, you know, because I believe that failure is an event, it's not a person. And a lot of people I know, they lose a business, they don't go back in business, they go back and working for somebody else. So how did you come back from losing that $1.2 million?
One word, man, that my mom gave me. One word was just raise your hands and say shit. Like, you know, I mean, I had enough. I had that business to lose. That's a blessing. I remember getting robbed in my business in Vegas, and I was so mad at the getting robbed. And then I got pulled over on the way back from going and fixing the place, and after getting robbed, and I was pissed. Like, first I get robbed, then I get pulled over, and I say to the cop, I said, "My business just got robbed. I apologize, officer, that I was speeding, but you know, I was trying to get home." And he's like, "Okay, cool." And I thought he was not going to give me the ticket, and then he gave me the ticket. And when he walked away, I was so mad, and I yelled at God at that time. I was like, "Why would this happen?" And he said, "Well, you had the opportunity to get robbed because I blessed you with the business. So if you would like me to take away the business so you won't get robbed anymore, then I could do that. Or you could thank me for having a business and getting robbed." And it changed the perspective for me at that point and helped me to realize that. And, I think that that's a big aspect of it, man, is just to make sure that, the bouncing back part, I mean, money's going to come and go. I've got a phenomenal wife. Money's going to come and go, but I tell you, like, I just lost my dad, December 19th, 2021. And, I tell you, for all the money in the world, if I could have 5 seconds with that dude, 5 seconds, I'd give everything. It doesn't matter. All that stuff at the end. And this may sound cliche, but it's not cliche. It's my reality, man. At the end, when I spent time with him, and I spent time with him until I think it was Thursday, and then he passed away on Sunday. And I mean, those moments of us talking about cars and him telling me that he loves me. And I remember him looking over at me, and I said, Pop, and I had my tears in my eyes. And I was just like, Pop, I don't know what to do, man. Like, you're my guy. Like, you're my best friend, man. And he said, son, I'll always be with you, man. I'll always be with you. No matter where you go, I'll always be with you. And all the money in the world, I'd give it up for 5 seconds with him. And I could tell you this, all the people out there, and my brother hit me with this, and this was a hard one to swallow. And this would be a controversial one to a lot of people out there. But I told my brother at times when I was, on the road a ton, he's like, he was concerned for me. And I said, son, I'm doing this for my family. I'm on the road. I'm doing this for my family, the legacy of my family. And then he looked at me, he said, no, bro, you're doing it for you. Because if you were truly doing it for your family, then you would figure out a way to be able to be home and spend time with them. All the people that are out there saying that you're grinding or you're hustling because you're doing it for your family, I can speak from experience. You're not. You're doing it for yourself. Spend time with your family. Spend time with the people who mean the most. Love your wife, love your kids, because those will be the people who are with you at the end anyway. And that's the only thing that matters.
And I talk about that all the time, because so many people worry about how many followers do I have? How many people are hearting me, and all this. And I'm like, we came in on a steel gurney. We're leaving out on a steel bed. And it really only matters the people that are around that table when you go. And a lot of people, like for me, I came to that realization. If you ever sat in an MRI for any amount of time, that's when you start really thinking about stuff. You're like, well, this other stuff really doesn't matter. You know what I mean? So now talk to us. How do you go from cutting hair to now being featured in Forbes, to be a keynote speaker, to be in the top 1% in podcasts in the world? How did this all happen?
I think, it's faith to faith and glory to glory. I believe, God is good. And, you never know the seeds that he's planting, right? And the things that he's preparing you for. We talked about it earlier. If you're super kind and you contribute to every single person around you, you make a ton of friends, you stay curious about what's going on. And, for me, my podcasting career, my speaking career, I've been speaking publicly and all over the world globally for 29 years, but I was doing it in a different medium. I started off by just technically training hairdressers. And then I started speaking about all other hairdressers that were technically training. And then people started to ask me, can you please come and speak to our company? But we don't need you doing anything. And then I had people in the audience that had a husband that was in the insurance industry. And he said, can you come and speak for my company? And I want you to know that God's ways are way bigger and bigger than ours. And most of the time, this is going to be another very, very unpopular thing to say. But most of the time, guys, your plans aren't going to work out. They aren't going to work out exactly the way that you wanted them to. The iPhone didn't turn out the way that the iPhone is now on the first time. So allowing yourself to be able to have those iterations and the keynote speaking part of it. I mean, I was just telling the story, right? So I had been speaking in the professional beauty industry. I always want to speak outside of it. And then I got a couple opportunities. And there was one opportunity where Ken Blanchard was speaking at the Chamber of Commerce in our town. Well, he's phenomenal. Yeah. And Richard, right before I left, I was going to, my wife said, what are you doing? I said, I'm signing a book to Ken. And she's like, well, what do you mean? Do you know him? And I said, not yet, but he's going to be in the room. So I waited in the room until people would applaud. And when they applauded, then no one cared what was going on in the audience because there was commotion. So when that happened, I acted like I needed to go to the bathroom, and then I ran over to his table, knelt down, but I knew I only had about 15 seconds. I said, Mr. Blanchard, I want to thank you so much for your concepts and philosophies. They helped me to build my business. And I just want to thank you. My name is Kelly Cardenas. And he said, what is your business? I said, thank you so much for asking. Here's my book. And I handed it to him, and then I sprinted off. Well, little did I know that after, when we got done with that convention or the Chamber of Commerce event, a lady walked up to me and she said, are you Kelly Cardenas? I said, yes. She said, did you give Ken Blanchard a book? And I was like, oh man, she's his handler. She's mad at me. And I said, yes. And she said, well, he actually loved it. I'm the president of the Servant Leadership Institute, and we're having a conference, and we have space for one more speaker. Would you be available? And I said, absolutely. So I didn't care if I was where I was on the docket, Richard, but what happened in that time was they did their docket, unlike other people where they did it in alphabetical order. So it was Art Barter, Ken Blanchard, Kelly Cardenas. And because of my name, started with a C and an A, I was number 3rd on the bill, right underneath Ken Blanchard. And this wasn't because I was great. It wasn't because I had done all these things. It was because God had ordained that thing and he blessed it. And so I can't take any of the credit. And when people ask, like, how did these things happen? I mean, we got in the top 1%, Richard, of globally ranked in the top 1% in podcasts. And I've never done any promotion at all, not one bit. And my buddy asked me, he's like, hey man, I got a guy that can help promote your podcast. And I was like, okay. So I don't know what that means, but because I never checked the stats. And he's like, well, let me check your stats and see if my guy can help you. And he looked at him. He's like, my guy can't help you. And I said, why? And he said, because he was in, like, my friend was in the, I think, top 10, and he got to like 8 or 4 by paying this guy. And he said, well, the guy can't help you. And I said, why? And he said, because you're in the top 1.5% right now. And in the last couple of months, we got down in the top 1%. But that wasn't because I'm the man. It's just because I have really, really cool friends and people like yourself who support it. And so I find that when you do what you're passionate about, right? When you do what you're purposed to do, money will flow. And then all you have to do is keep the money so you can continue to do what you're passionate about and what you're purposed to do. And when that happens, then you get to bless so many people around you because you keep getting blessed. And I tell you, this is the last little thing here, Richard, is, God told me, he asked me, he showed me a glass and he said, how much water could fit in the glass? It was like an 8-ounce glass. And I was like, that's easy, 8 ounces. And then God asked me again, how much could fit in it? And I said, 8 ounces. And then he asked me again. And I said, well, 8 ounces? And God said, all the water in the world can fit in that glass if you cut the bottom out of it and you allow it to flow through. He said, so that's just the same way as the blessings that I'm going to give to you. If you let them flow through you and onto others, then I'll bless you with every single thing that you can ever imagine. But once you put a cap on the bottom and you try and keep it, it'll overflow and you won't even be able to hold on to that stuff anymore.
Wow, that's deep. And I love that. Now I got a question to ask because, I think we're on like episode 450 or something stupid. I just didn't know that I was doing an episode a day, sometimes 3 or 4. But a lot of people, because I started teaching about podcasting, one of the main questions was asked. They say, well, I got a problem. I can't get anybody to come on my show. And I say to them, are you adding value to their life, or are you just asking them to come on my show? Like when I messaged you, if I would have said, hey, Kelly, I'm in the top 1% of the podcasts in the world too. You want to come on my show? You would have looked at me like, this guy's an asshole. But, if I would have said, Kelly, like I did, Kelly, I would love to have you come on. I would love to have you share your journey and your mission. How can I support you? I think a lot of people would be a little bit more successful with getting people like you and JLD and Daniel, on the show. What do you think about that?
Well, I think the great thing about you, Richard, is that it's real. And for those of you listening, if I was to show you my messages that I got from Richard, he said nothing about himself. Even today, I asked, how long do you need to go with your show? And he said, it's all about you and your mission. I want to make sure that I get that out there. So these are things that he's doing that you, as a listener and as a supporter and as a fan of Richard, you aren't seeing, but he's doing. And that's what I call integrity. Integrity is being the same in the dark as you are in the light. And that's the reason why, Richard, you're doing what you're doing, man. I mean, why people want to be on your show and why this is, I mean, one of the top shows in the entire world is because you are genuine in your heart shows, man. It shows in every message. You're phenomenal, man. I mean, I want to be you when I grow up, man.
Oh, wow. So you got to get rid of all that hair and get some of this. So my last question, because I'm, like I said, I'm so respectful of your time, and I know you want to get and go bowling with your kids. How do we find you? How do we support your mission? I love your podcast. I don't miss an episode. How do we find your books? How do we get to find you?
Well, I think the biggest thing is right in front of you is kellycardenas.com. That was going to be the easiest, way to be able to find me. The podcast, honestly, has been one of the greatest joys and probably one of the coolest projects that I've ever done in my entire life. And the reason why is because I did it for my kids. You listen to it, and every person that comes on the show gives advice to my kids. And I wanted my kids to see that anything is possible as long as you have the right attitude and the right work ethic. And so, the hub for everything is kellycardenas.com. I mean, you got the little sign that's somewhere up there above my head. It says the Hideout. And what we did is we created a 2.5-day event where getting people back in touch with the one thing that we all lose when we grow up, which is joy. And we're going to take and we're going to help people to get to know people before you ever need them. And, it's just, it's an experience where you just get to, you get to walk away from the success part of it and walk into your significance. And so that's where you could find me. And I love every single person out there that, whether you're supporting or you're not supporting, I love you on both sides. Richard, you are a phenomenal human being, and you're incredible at what you do, man.
I love it. And I love what you just said, because it reminds me of something that our friend Russell Russell Brunson says, dig your well before you're thirsty. And I think, you start building relationships for stuff 5-10 years out, and like I said, I'm all about generational relationships. And I'm just truly humbled and grateful to finally call you friend.
Well, I'm going to force you to be my friend for the rest of your life, Richard, and your listeners are going to be listening to you because we're going to have you as a guest on the podcast. And I absolutely love you, man. You're incredible. Keep doing great things, man. And you're making such an impact. And I think that the thing that I want to encourage you with right here, Richard, is that the impact that you're having, you won't see. The ripple effects and the people that you're impacting, a lot of times it'll be a friend of a friend or a cousin or a uncle or aunt. But you have no idea the impact that you have on this world, and the world needs more Richards in this world.
I love it. Thank you so much. And guys, that ties into I always end the show with this quote by Miss Oprah Winfrey. She said that if you want to help yourself, help others. So guys, that's why I always ask you guys, make sure that you're always helping others. If you're struggling with $1, go give $1, because the world is going to give it back what you give. So I just want to thank you guys. I love you guys. Definitely check out his book, the podcast. Check it all out. He's the man you need to know. He is a life form of an energy drink. He's like the human form of an energy drink. So Kelly, I love you, brother. Thank you so much.
I love you too, man. Have a wonderful day.
You too. All right, guys. Have a happy Father's Day. And remember, vertical momentum. The only way to go is but up. I love you guys.